He left her with nothing, no house, no hope, not even respect. But the same man who threw Ada away would one day sit trembling at his own wedding, while the whole hall turned to watch her. This is not just a story of betrayal, it's a story of how God can turn ashes into beauty, and how the woman they mocked became the queen they could not ignore. Stay with me, because what happened in that hall will leave you breathless. The town of Umuka was small, but that night it felt too small for Ada's heart. News had spread like wildfire. Her husband Tunde had won a road contract worth millions of naira. People shouted it at the beer joint, whispered it at the well, and clapped him on the back when he passed. Tunde is a big man now, they said. The sound carried to Ada's ears, but instead of joy she felt a knot in her stomach. Tunde came home late that night, face glowing with pride. He hugged their children, Keen and Zuri, with quick hands, then sat down and said, "Ada, things have changed. We are going up." Ada forced a smile and placed hot stew before him, but she saw something in his eyes, a hunger that was not about food. The days that followed proved her fear right. Tunde started wearing new clothes, carrying new phones, and spending time with new friends who laughed too loudly. Ada noticed he stopped looking at her the way he once did. One evening, he pulled into their compound in a borrowed shiny car. A woman in gold sat in the front seat, her laugh sharp as a knife. "Ada, this is Bisi," Tunde announced carelessly. Ada's hand shook as she pulled her children inside. That night, when the house was quiet, Tunde dropped papers on the table. "Sign," he said. Ada looked at them, confused. "What is this?" "Freedom," he replied coldly. "I want a divorce. Bisi can open doors for me. You are slowing me down." Her heart dropped. 7 years of marriage gone like smoke in the wind. She thought of their vows, of nights when they had prayed for daily bread, of days she carried him when no one else believed in him. "Tunde," she whispered, "after all we built together." He shrugged. "Don't hold my legs, I am climbing higher." Ada signed with trembling hands, because sometimes love cannot fight against pride. The next morning she packed her clothes, held Kine's small hand in her left and Zuri's in her right, and left Umuka. They boarded a crowded bus to the city, the children's faces pressed to the window, while Ada silently cried into her wrapper. The city was a roaring beast. Cars honked, sellers shouted, and the street smelled of roasted corn and diesel. Ada rented a single room behind a phone shop. The landlady warned her, "Pay weekly or out you go." Ada nodded, clutching her children close. For days she tried to settle. She bought a few things at the market, rice, beans, salt, but money was thin, and the children's needs were many. One hot afternoon she walked into a supermarket, her children trailing behind. The lights were bright, the shelves full. She picked what she needed carefully: oil, milk, soap, a little rice. Zuri begged for biscuits, Keene asked for cereal. Ada sighed but added them, hoping the money would stretch. At the counter the machine beeped. The total climbed higher than the coins in her purse. Her throat tightened. "Remove the oil," she said. "Still too much." "Remove the rice," she whispered, shame burning her cheeks. The cashier sighed impatiently. The guard by the door glanced at her. The children stared at the floor. Then a voice came from behind her, calm, kind. "Please, let me handle it." Ada turned. A man stood there in a plain shirt, holding a small basket. His eyes were gentle, not mocking. "Add it to mine," he told the cashier. He didn't wait for Ada's permission. He simply paid. Ada's pride fought her gratitude, but the tears in her eyes betrayed her. She whispered, "Thank you." The man smiled at Keene and Zuri. "Do you like books? Toy cars?" The children nodded shyly. "I'm Chima," he said softly. "It's nothing. Today I carry you. Tomorrow, maybe you'll carry someone else." Ada didn't know this man was the owner of Sunbridge, the same company that gave Tunde his millions. She only knew that for the first time in weeks she felt seen, not as a burden but as a human being. Ada carried the heavy shopping bags out of the supermarket, her children skipping beside her. But her heart carried something heavier, a mixture of gratitude, shame, and confusion. Who is this man who stepped in so calmly, like he had been waiting all along? She clutched the small white card he had handed her. On it, neat letters spelled Chima Okoro, Sunbridge Group. She didn't know what Sunbridge meant, only that his voice had been steady and kind. "If you can cook," he had said, "call me, I will order. That way it's not help, it's work." That night, Ada cooked rice and stew with shaking hands. The smell filled their tiny room, making it feel less like a stranger's place. Keen licked his spoon clean. Zuri clapped her hands. "Mummy, you cook like Grandma," she said. Ada smiled faintly, but her mind kept drifting to the card on the table. Should she call? Or would he think she was desperate? By morning, hunger gave her courage. She dialed the number with sweaty fingers. The phone rang once, twice. "Hello?" His voice was the same, calm, measured. "Good morning, sir. This is Ada, from the supermarket." "Ada," he repeated warmly. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Yes," she lied. "I cooked jollof beans stew. If you want, I can bring samples." There was a pause, then soft laughter. "Bring 2 plates, and one for my receptionist, or she will not forgive me." Ada tied her food carefully, wrapped it in cloth, and walked with her children to the address written on the card. The building was tall, with shining glass. For a moment, Ada's knees weakened. Could she, a divorced woman with only 2 children and a small pot, walk inside? At the front desk, a young woman with neat hair looked up. "You must be Ada. The food smells heavenly already." She introduced herself as Ife. "Wait here. Sir will come down." To Ada's shock, Chima came himself. No guards, no big airs. He greeted Keen and Zuri first before turning to her. "Let's taste," he said, leading them to a small table. He opened the bowl, took 1 spoonful, then another. He closed his eyes briefly, as if listening to a secret. When he opened them, he smiled. "You cook like someone who prays." Ada lowered her gaze. "It is my mother's hand inside mine." By the time she left the office, she was carrying something more valuable than money. An order for 30 plates the next day, fully paid in advance. The following weeks blurred with work. Ada cooked from dawn, her children helping where they could. Keen counted spoons. Zuri folded napkins. Every morning, she delivered steaming trays to Sunbridge offices, where workers began to greet her as Madam Rice. If became her friend, slipping her jokes and encouragement. Chima sometimes came down while she arranged the food. He never asked prying questions, but he listened. He told stories of his childhood in Orlu, of goats that chased him and rivers that nearly swallowed him. He laughed easily, never making her feel small. The small room behind the phone shop began to change. A bigger pot appeared. New shoes for the children. A little bookshelf for Zuri. A toy car with a winding key for Keen. Ada noticed something else too. Her tears at night grew fewer. Then one Friday, Chima asked, "Can you bring tomorrow's food to the top floor? We have a meeting." Ada agreed. The next morning, she carried trays into a room with polished wood and tall windows. At the head of the long table sat Chima. The workers greeted him not as a colleague, but as their leader. One man turned and said, "Chairman, should we begin?" Ada nearly dropped the tray. "Chairman Sunbridge," her chest pounded. She looked up at the wall, where a framed photo showed Chima cutting a ribbon beside a governor. She froze. This was the man, the very top of the rope. The owner of the company that had lifted Tundi into wealth and into pride. She placed the food quietly and stepped back, her hands trembling. Dignity was her last dress. She wore it firmly. She left the hall without a word, but inside her heart a storm had begun to stir. Ida walked out of the tall building with her tray pressed tightly against her chest. Her legs shook, and the sound of her children's chatter beside her felt far away. The sun was hot, yet her body was cold. Chima, kind Chima, who paid for her groceries, who praised her stew, who smiled at her children, was the same man whose company had handed Tunda the contract that destroyed her home. That evening she sat quietly on the edge of her bed. Ken and Zuri played with bottle tops, building tiny castles. Thelda stared at Chima's card on the table. Should she still trust him? Or was this another trick life was playing on her? Days passed, and Chima continued to order food as if nothing had changed. He always came down to greet her, his voice gentle, his laughter light. Finally, one afternoon, Ada found her courage. She waited until he finished tasting her beans. Then she spoke. "Sir, I know who you are now. You are the owner of Sunbridge." Chima did not deny it. He nodded slowly. "Yes, Ada, I am." Her throat tightened. "It was your contract that made Tunde leave me." Chima leaned forward, his eyes steady. "My company signs many contracts. I did not know your story then. I did not even meet him. But Ada, what he did to you was not my pen, it was his heart." His words fell like rain on dry ground. Ada wanted to resist them, but they soaked into her anyway. She lowered her gaze. "I believe you," she whispered. From that day, their bond grew different. Chima still paid fairly, but now he lingered longer when he came down. Sometimes he asked about the children's school. Sometimes he told jokes that made Zuri laugh until tears rolled down her cheeks. Kini began running to the door whenever Ada said, "We're going to deliver." One Sunday, Chima surprised them. He came not in a big car but on foot, holding a small bag of fruits. He took off his shoes at the door without being told. He sat on their stool, ate rice from their small plates and laughed as Zuri tried to braid his hair with her doll's comb. "Mummy," Kina whispered later, "is Uncle Chima our father now?" Ada froze, but Chima answered softly, "I will be what you need me to be. I will stay." Slowly, Ada's heart began to open again. She remembered Tunde's cold words, his gold-dressed mistress the night he pushed her out with nothing but her bag. She compared it to Chima's quiet respect, his gentle presence, the way he carried her children on his shoulders like they were his own. Months passed. Ada's cooking business grew. With Chima's quiet support, she rented a bigger room and bought a second stove. Soon she had 2 helpers. Her name spread in the city as the woman who cooked with love. People called her Madam Peace, not just Madam Rice. One evening after church, Chima walked her and the children home. The sky was purple, the air cool. He stopped under a neem tree, cleared his throat and looked at her with eyes that did not waver. "Ada," he said, "you have given me more than food. You've given me laughter, warmth, and a home I didn't know I was missing. Will you let me be your husband?" Ada's breath caught. She looked at her children. Zuri smiled shyly. Kini shouted, "Yes." Ada's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "Yes, Chima. We will walk together." They married quietly, with only close friends and family. No gold chairs, no loud music, just simple songs, shared food, and vows spoken with truth. For the first time in years, Ada felt safe. For the first time, Kini and Zuri had a father who chose them without question. Ada's new life had just begun, but fate, as always, was not finished. Life with Chima was calm, steady, and full of small joys. He woke early, packed Keen's school bag, and tied Zuri's shoelaces even though he was clumsy at it. He ate Ada's cooking not like a rich man tasting a chef's work, but like a husband eating his wife's love. The children laughed more, and Ada's eyes no longer carried the weight of endless tears. But peace has a way of testing itself. One evening, while Ada was stirring okra soup, a bike man knocked at the door. He handed her a gold-trimmed envelope. Ada frowned. It felt heavy in her hand, too polished for her small home. She opened it slowly. The letters inside were big and proud. Tunde and Bisi, a royal wedding. Her heart skipped. She read the venue, the date, the time, and there in careful ink was her own name, invited as a guest. Ada sat on the bed, the card trembling in her hand. Memories rushed back. Tunde's cold face, his words, "Sign, Ada. You slow me down." She remembered leaving Umuka with nothing but her children and a shaking heart. Now he wanted her to watch him marry another, as if to prove she had been nothing. When Chima came in, wiping his hands on a towel, he saw the envelope on the bed. He read it, then looked at Ada quietly. "Will you go?" Ada sighed, her eyes clouded. "I don't know. My anger has gone, but my wound remembers his name." Chima nodded. "Your peace is more important than his pride. If you go, I will walk beside you. If you do not go, I will stay near you. Either way, you will not stand alone." His words settled in her heart like calm water. She kissed his hand softly. "Thank you." The days before the wedding were loud in the city. Billboards flashed Tunde's name. Social media carried photos of Bisi in golden gowns. People called it the event of the year. Tunde strutted in front of cameras, bragging that his hall would shake with laughter and music. Yet behind the bright lights, rumors whispered Sunbridge was reviewing his contract papers, and numbers did not match. Some said his days of wealth were already trembling. Ada ignored the noise, focusing on her home. But when the morning of the wedding came, she dressed carefully in a plain blue gown. Not loud, not poor, simply dignified. Kani wore a neat shirt, Zuri a simple dress. Chima put on a dark suit. Nothing flashy, but when he stood beside her, he looked like a pillar. They arrived at the hall quietly, slipping past the cameras. Inside, the place glittered with chandeliers, gold chairs, and a red carpet that ran like a river of fire. Guests turned when they saw Ada. Whispers spread like wind in dry grass. Is that not Tunde's first wife? The one he threw away? Who is the man with her? Ada walked with steady steps, not rushing, not shrinking. Chima stayed half a step behind her, like a shield that didn't boast. They sat in the middle row, close enough to be seen, far enough not to fight. At the front, Tunde waited in a white agbada, his chest puffed. He kept glancing at the doors, his eyes searching. When he saw Ada, his smile faltered. The crowd's whispers grew louder. Then the music swelled, and BC entered in a gown covered with crystals. Cameras flashed, people clapped. The ceremony began, but Tunde's eyes kept drifting to the rows where Ada sat with her children and Chima. His hands trembled, though he tried to hide it. As vows were being read, two men in plain suits slipped quietly into the hall. They carried files and wore serious faces. They walked straight to the manager at the side. Murmurs rippled. Even the pastor's voice wavered for a moment. Tunde's forehead broke into sweat. The day he had planned to shine was already beginning to crack. The hall glittered with light, but a strange heaviness filled the air. The pastor cleared his throat, trying to press forward. "Do you, Tunde, take BC?" Tunde's lips moved, but his voice cracked. His eyes were locked, not on the bride, but on Ada. She sat calmly in her blue gown, Keen leaning on her shoulder, Zuri holding her hand. And beside her, Chima, silent, steady, present. Whispers ran like ants across the rows. "Look how she shines," one woman muttered. "She doesn't look broken at all," another replied. Bisi's smile faltered. She followed Tunde's gaze and froze. "Who is she?" she hissed. Tunde tried to smile, but sweat ran down his forehead. "No one," he muttered. "No one?" Bisi's eyes narrowed. "Then why are your hands shaking?" The pastor's voice faded under the murmurs. At the side, the two men in plain suits whispered to the hall manager. Papers changed hands. The manager frowned, then whispered to the MC. The MC glanced at Tunde with pity. Finally, the pastor stopped. "Perhaps we should pause." "No," Tunde barked. "Continue." His voice was loud, too loud, echoing like a desperate drum. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Bisi turned sharply, her eyes blazing. "Tell me the truth, Tunde. Who is that woman?" Silence swallowed the hall. Cameras swung toward Ada. She didn't rise, didn't flinch. She only sat with quiet dignity, her children safe at her sides. "She is my former wife," Tunde admitted at last, his voice small. Gasps rippled across the crowd. "And the man beside her?" Bisi asked, her voice shaking. Tunde's lips quivered. His eyes darted toward Chima, who sat still, watching him with calm, unreadable eyes. Some guests began whispering, "That's Chima Okoro and Sunbridge." The name passed like fire from row to row. The real owner. The man who gave Tunde his contract. Bisi's face turned pale. She looked at Tunde with disgust. "So you divorced your wife for me, bragged about your millions, and now I find out you can't even stand without shaking." She dropped her bouquet on the carpet. "I will not marry a liar." The hall erupted. Some clapped. Others shouted. Phones flashed. Cameras zoomed. Bisi turned and stormed out, her gown sweeping like a wave. Her bridesmaids followed in a rush. Tunde stood frozen at the altar, his hands trembling, his agbada suddenly too heavy. He looked at Ada, beautiful, calm, glowing, not with gold but with peace. He saw the man beside her, strong yet humble. He saw the children who once called him father, now resting in another man's care without fear. His knees gave way. He slumped onto a chair, covering his face. For the first time, the proud man looked small. Ada stood then slowly. She didn't gloat, she didn't throw words. She simply turned, gathered her children, and walked out with Chima at her side. The crowd parted for them, whispers chasing their steps. That's the true queen. God lifted her. Outside, the sun was warm. The wind smelled of fried plantain from a woman's tray nearby. Ada lifted her face to the sky and smiled. Kine tugged her hand. "Mummy, are we going home?" "Yes," Ada said, her voice steady. "Home." Chima opened the car door. Zuri climbed in first, giggling. Kine followed, humming softly. Ada paused a moment, looking back at the grand hall where noise still roared. She whispered a quiet prayer. Lord, thank you for turning ashes into beauty. Then she entered the car. As they drove away, Chima reached for her hand. You did not need to prove yourself today, he said softly. Ada smiled, her eyes glistening. I didn't go to prove anything. I went to be seen, and I was. The car disappeared into the city streets, carrying a woman once abandoned, now crowned with peace. A man who gave love without noise, and two children whose laughter filled the air like music. Back inside the hall, Tunde sat alone, surrounded by whispers. His crown of pride had fallen. His wealth could not hide his emptiness. For the first time he felt the true weight of the words he once threw at Ada. But Ada never looked back. Her story had moved forward, and this time she was walking on solid ground. In the end, Ada didn't need riches or revenge to shine. She walked with peace, and peace crowned her higher than pride ever could. Her story reminds us all. The stone builders reject, God can make the cornerstone. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to join us for more African folktales that prove destiny cannot be stolen.